Good, it works. Hello everybody, it's very nice to be back. I spoke at this conference last year. I wasn't sure if it was really worthwhile for me to come back and speak again. However, I actually now have a different role in the cannabis industry, so I have many more interesting little tidbits that I can share with you. I was the managing director of Beacon for 1 year, and during that 1 year we grew our business from 6 million to 12 million. I'm extremely proud of that. I was then headhunted to a company it's actually called the Australian Institute of Medicinal Cannabis, and we have two businesses. We have a clinic business and we have a wholesaling business. The story behind these businesses is really a really heartwarming story. My boss is a very famous criminal lawyer, and he was wrongfully charged for something about 5 years ago, and he got very ill. He was put on antidepressants and he couldn't cope, he couldn't get out of bed, he didn't want to work anymore. That's when he discovered cannabis. Because he represents many hardened criminals who actually self-medicate with cannabis, he wanted to help people. So he opens up a medical clinic with a dispensary so that patients can come and see a doctor, get sound medical advice, and then they can get their medicine on the spot. We make no money from that business. In fact, we're not even breaking even yet. The way that we make our money is from wholesaling. The market in Australia is so dynamic and so difficult. It's just growing at the speed of light. It's actually crazy. I've been in this job for 12 months now. My background is 30 years in pharmaceuticals, and I'm also a medicinal cannabis patient. As one of the men spoke earlier this morning, 3 years ago I was put into hospital because I have really severe rheumatoid arthritis, and I failed 15 drugs. I nearly died. I lost 20 kilos, and I was really, really, really ill, and I could not take those drugs. This is when I discovered cannabis. So cannabis changed my life, and now I've reduced my drug load by 80%. I think that's something fantastic. I think why cannabis is so important, and especially to me, allopathic medicine and drugs really just mask the problem, and then you have to take other drugs to mitigate all the problems you get from taking drugs. I then had a job where I looked after all of Asia working in complementary medicine, and people used to say to me, well, it takes too long to work, and I used to say to people, well, it takes too long to get sick. So this is why cannabis is the panacea for both, because cannabis fixes the problem, but it also fixes it quickly. So if you've got anxiety, you've got PTSD, you've got insomnia, problems like this, while you're taking the cannabis and getting better over time, your symptoms are relieved like immediately. So that's the company background. Then I'm going to talk about medicinal cannabis in Australia and what the market's doing, how dynamic it is, and what's good and what's bad. Regulatory landscape, which just gets harder and harder and harder. Then we'll look at the major players. We'll look at how does the system work, and the therapeutic goods administration, and where we're going to go from here. This is just a picture of my team. So our business started 3 years ago, and the first year in business they took 300,000. The second year in business they took 12 million. The year that I've been in business, our revenue is now at 24 million. Now that sounds fantastic, it sounds like a lot of money, but the margins are extremely low. So we need high volume to be able to have a business and to continue. Also, there's two really, really big players in Australia, and they're very hard to compete with, and I thought, how do I win this race, what do I do? And the answer to that was to have more suppliers than anybody else. So my company represents 50 brands, and it's growing all the time. And that makes us very suitable and very reliable for pharmacies, because pharmacies are actually sick to death of negotiating with suppliers, having to ring up 50 different people to order. They just want to be able to order from one place. This is all the brands that we represent. As I said, I'm adding more every week. I have this philosophy in life, work hard, play hard, and we also give back a lot to the industry. So we have one facility in Alexandria in Sydney that holds 20,000 units, but we outgrew that so quickly that we now have a new facility that holds 85,000 units. And so this is just a picture of the party. This here, that's our founder, Idan, the criminal lawyer. We're actually at a fancy dress party, dressed up like Western, having fun. Sorry, move a little here. Sorry. And the top picture there, The girl in the dark dress, that's the girl that worked with me for 1 year and helped me make $12 million. The reason that that's important is people don't understand the dynamics or the landscape. The big companies have huge sales teams. They're not doing anything. Nobody wants to talk to them. Nobody wants to see them. There's sort of 20 or 30 main clinic groups in the country, and you just have to make deals with these groups. Going and seeing one little doctor's not going to get you anywhere. And up there in the top corner, we had this famous artist come to our party, and she did a live painting of a monkey with a vape. And then what we do is we auction these off, and then we give the money back so that we can give compassionate access to patients so that we can help people. There's just some more pictures. This is the senior executive team with myself. This team is suppliers that we work with, and that's just us at a booth at one of the conferences. So what do? We try to be better than everybody else. And it's really interesting because the language and the lingo in this industry is different. Everybody speaks differently. And it comes down to tiny little things. Like I remember when I started, it used to say same-day delivery. I said, you have to stop doing that because we can't be sure that the postage is going to do that. So now we say same-day dispatch. So we have a huge team at Alexandria. We have a huge team at the other factory, which is like 2 hours away. It's near a postal service. And we have, at the moment, there's 6,000 or 7,000 pharmacies in Australia, and we have 500 customers that are very, very loyal to us, and they buy all the products from us. We also have a special portal that we've built that suppliers can update and look at their sales in real time. So any time of the day they can go on and look and check and see how their stock is going, how quickly it's moving. This is just our organogram. So this is how quickly the business has grown over a short period of time. So in our clinic, we have, we have 5 doctors. We also have 3 doctors doing telehealth, and we're also building another clinic. And you can see the amount of staff that we need for the picking and packing and running the warehouse to be able to dispatch these orders every day. So presently our revenue is $2 million a month. So with an average product costing $100, $150, that's a lot of stock that's moving every day. The other thing that's happening in Australia is prices are tumbling. So anything that's grown in Australia is obviously quite inexpensive because we're not paying import or export things or anything like that. However, we can't even come close to meeting the demand. And there's many companies, it's becoming a race to the bottom, and we believe that many companies in the next 1 to 2 years will not be here anymore. There's just no room for them. In fact, 3 of the biggest companies right now are already in administration. Now, I remember when I used to work in Asia, in Sri Lanka, they used to say to me, you're so lucky there's no corruption in your country. And I said, that's not true. The corruption is probably worse, it just comes in a different disguise. And what's disappointing about the market in Australia is the wrong people are getting the money. So like pharmacies are getting so much of the money, they're putting $25 dispensing fee, they're doing deals with suppliers, they're getting kickbacks. Doctors are opening clinics and they've got their own brands, which is a complete conflict of interest. This is why our company sets ourselves apart from everybody. We refuse to have our own brand. How can I honestly represent 50 suppliers and help them if I'm trying to sell my own brand at the same time? I really, really disagree with this, and it's not right. You've got doctors opening clinics with their own brand. I don't go to the doctor and get antibiotic and he said to me, do you want AstraZeneca or do you want Pfizer? It's just not right. So, market dynamics. I'm really proud that when I worked at Beacon, despite only being 2 of us, we were number 4 in market share against 3 huge companies that had huge sales teams, huge sales forces. Now, I'm not vindictive, I'm not nasty, but it was called Beacon in Australia. It's now called Vivo, and they've been bought out by a company called MedRelief. They're now losing market share because they're doing what all the big companies did. They're putting all this staff, they're going around visiting doctors, and they're just not getting anywhere with it because there's really no point. Now, this is not the most up-to-date data, but you can see the growth from 2019 to 2022. The growth is huge. We're getting more and more patients all the time, but the cost is prohibitive. We have many clinics that are offering free consultations, but they're not free at all because you get charged per prescription. So they'll give you 10 prescriptions and your free consultation ends up costing you $350. The other thing that they're doing is people are compounding. In Australia, it's actually illegal to compound unless a medicine is not readily available. We now have 70 suppliers in Australia and we have 700 or 800 SKUs, so there's definitely something for everybody. The other problem we face is that we're not allowed to talk about anything. We're so restricted by the TGA and by the rules, and yet we have social media called Reddit, and the patients can go on Reddit and they can say whatever they want. And this is causing a lot of problems for suppliers, because a patient will get a product, they'll use it and they'll say, this is fantastic, I slept like a baby, I really love it. But then next month they find there's a new product, they want to try it, it's got a completely different terpene profile, and then they get on Reddit and they say it doesn't work, and they can crucify a company, and it's really, really not fair. So we have to work out a way to mitigate this so that we can help patients, but also help the brands and help the new suppliers. I feel sorry for any new entrant into Australia right now, because it is really, really, really hard. Having said that, we have some new recent entrants with very high quality products, and they're doing very well. So I actually work as a corporate advisor and a consultant, and I helped one brand launch, and they asked me like for forecasting. Everyone wants a forecast. When you're launching a product, it's nearly impossible. Like it's one of the hardest things to do. So they had one product that retailed at $135 and one product that retailed at $165. And they said, to me, what do you think? I said, if your premium brand is good, you will sell much more of that. And they said, no, Lisa, you're wrong, I don't believe you. We'll sell much more of the cheaper brand. They didn't. They sold 4 times as much of the premium brand. And then Australia, I'm sure it's like anywhere else, it's about network. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You need the right connections, you need to know the right people. And basically, cannabis has become a commodity. It's about doing deals more than about helping people, and that actually really bothers me. And it's one of the reasons that we have the clinics and that we want to give good patient care. So, what are the demand trends? What are the patient demographics? Fundamentally, 80 or 85% of the patients in Australia are what we call recreational or adult users, as somebody said before, and the other 15% are true patients who are patients. Having said that, the recreational users are usually self-medicating because they've got insomnia, they've got anxiety, they've got something like that anyway. And the one good thing we find in Australia is people actually don't want to buy off the black market anymore. They actually prefer to get a prescription and get medicine because they know that they're getting something good quality and they understand what's in it. The other problem we have in Australia is the lack of education. So people don't understand the fact that the terpene profile is so important. Another reason why they made a big mistake in Australia, before I started at Beacon, they launched 6 flowers at once, and they launched flowers from 16% THC to 25%, but they charged the same price for all. Now, if you do mathematics, I'm getting much more bang for my buck if I buy the 25% THC for $150 than if I buy the 16%. But there's also this myth that the higher THC, the better it is, and we all know that that's not true. There's also a lot of CBD isolate prescribed in Australia by the doctors who are scared of cannabis. I personally think that's just a waste of money. I think you're just swallowing your money. I don't know why you'd even bother. So now we get to the regulatory landscape. This is the really, really tough part. The government just don't have a clue. I'm sorry, I just say this in a very basic way. So what happened initially, you would have to go to the doctor and he would do something called an SASB application, and it would take maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get your approval. They realised that that wasn't satisfactory, so they introduced something called the authorised prescriber scheme. So a doctor does some study and he'll pass a test and then he's allowed to prescribe. Then they thought, oh boy, this is still too hard. So they decided to categorise cannabis. So category 1, there's 5 categories. Category 1 is pure CBD, category 2, low THC, category 3 is balanced, category 4 is medium, and category 5 is high THC. Then they thought, oh, we'll get really clever here and we'll have all the different formats. So there's around 8 different formats. So the doctors now have to have 40 or 50 MAPS numbers, and it's just ludicrous because, you know, usually a prescriber just has a prescriber number. So this is what's causing all the bureaucracy and all the paperwork, and it's causing problem for pharmacies, it's causing problem for doctors. Also, it's causing a lot of illegal activity because some clinics are using a doctor's map that they've never even met, and they're actually dispensing prescriptions based on that, and that's just terrible. You should not be allowed to do that. Also now, getting permits used to take 1 or 2 months, now it's taking 3 months. So how do you plan your business? How do you make sure that you don't run out of stock? because if you do run out of stock, there's a good chance that a doctor will not continue to prescribe your product. So there's just so many things to think about. And the government now finally is having a huge crackdown, and many people are getting huge fines, and many people could potentially go out of business because they're realising that doctors with clinics should not have their own brand. We've got pharmacies opening medical clinics and compounding and making their own brands, as I mentioned earlier. That's not good medicine, that's not helping people, that's not good practice. We're all in business, we all want to make money. However, pharmacies are adding on, say, $80 to $90 to the product, and the person paying for that is the patient. And the suppliers who actually grow the product and do all the hard work are hardly getting any money, which I personally think is really wrong. So, about standards for cultivation, processing and distribution. The next speaker after me is Tom Forrest from Puro, New Zealand. He's an expert, so I'm going to leave that part to him. And ensuring product quality and safety for patients. This too is a concern. In Australia, cannabis is considered second-line therapy, and you're only allowed to be prescribed it when all other treatment modalities have failed. So in order to make sure that we can comply with that, we ask patients to get a health summary from their existing doctor. A lot of times those patients are turned away from the doctor and said, if you take cannabis, I will never see you again. That's just not fair to be denied treatment on that basis. However, from the doctor's point of view, it's very difficult because if you don't know somebody's background, so for instance, if you got called by the police in Australia and you had cannabis in your system, you had alcohol and you had opioids, cannabis would be the one that would get the blame, nothing else. So I myself as a doctor would be pretty scared to treat these patients. We have a doctor who's in her 70s, she's very experienced, she does telehealth, and recently a patient put in a complaint about her to APRA, saying that she was sitting in the room in the consultation smoking cannabis. The woman's never used cannabis in her life, and she wasn't in the room with the patient, she was on the telephone. Yet APRA never looks into the background of the complainant, they only look into the doctor, and it's really not fair. So, entering the market. This is tough, and it takes a long time, and you can spend a fortune and you can get nowhere. Consultants are charging $350 an hour. Firstly, you have to decide if you're going to be your own sponsor or if you want someone to sponsor you. Then you need state licenses for all of the places that you're going to warehouse and wholesale out of. You need QA, you need reg. There's just so many things to contend with. And then you get your import permit, but first you need an export permit from overseas. Now, we have quite a lot of growers in Australia, but it does not even come close to meeting the demand of the market. That's why we import so much. So the licensing and regulatory and the sponsorship is hard. With the distribution, there's many companies doing this. Some of the suppliers actually want to do their own distribution. They've tried it and they've come to me and said, you know what, it's too hard. We don't have the resources or the time and it's expensive. We realise that your service is good, so we're not going to do it ourselves. Cultivation and production, again, Tom Forrest, who's going to speak after me, is the best person to speak about that, but it's very important in Australia. Supply chain considerations, this too is quite difficult. In Australia, you're not allowed to use Australia Post. Postage is very expensive. One thing that sets our service apart, you can get distribution fees from 10% to maybe 40%. We charge 25%. But we're very fair because once it becomes volume, we give you a discount. So, for instance, if we're going to send 50 units to somebody, we reduce the price right down and we just add freight onto it. If you're going to transfer 1,000 units, we charge you $2 a unit plus freight. There's no other wholesaler in the country that does that. Also, when I started this job, there were two things. I thought, well, how am I going to win this race, especially against these big companies well established with lots of employees? So my first thought was to get more suppliers than anybody else, which we've done. Then it got really cutthroat and really difficult, and some companies were discounting and making offers to the point that they were losing money. So I introduced a new tactic. I think people get confused between the difference between tactic and strategies. So I said, how about everybody's going after the big guys, how about we go after all the little guys? And it worked. Within a month, we grew our revenue from 1.2 to 1.8 million, and now it's $2 million a month. And these little guys are very loyal. So this is why that we've been so competitive and that we last in the business when a lot of people aren't going to last at all. Research and development. There's a lot of research and development going on, but I also find this quite frustrating. I recently attended a TGA meeting, and the TGA man who was running the meeting said, oh, it'll be much better when we can get all these products registered and we can get them all on the ARTG. I don't think he realises that it costs tens or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to register a drug. It also takes about 10 years, and I'm not sure how anyone can ever register flower, because how can you promise that each batch is going to be exactly the same? I'm actually on a clinical trial register for any rheumatoid arthritis clinical trials, and they actually rang me last week, and they said they're trying a new trial. So after I failed the 14 drugs, the only drug that I can take and tolerate is Plaquenil, and then I take the Plaquenil and I use my cannabis. And so they rang me about the clinical trial, and I said, what's your protocol? And she told me, and I said, I'm already doing that. And she actually got quite rude, like as if I was some kind of espionage or spy. And I said, hold on a minute, just calm down. I said, I'm actually a patient, I actually work in the industry, and I've been doing this myself, and it works, it's fantastic. So their trial is going to be with Plaquenil and 300 milligrams of CBD a day, and it's going to be full spectrum, not isolate. So that's a very good trial. But you know, until recently, it was actually, I couldn't even afford it myself, you know, because you know, a couple of years ago, a 30 ml bottle was like $350. We've now got brands where they've got a CBD 200, which I can get for $165. So that's feasible, and I can do that. So there's a lot of research going on, but I don't know where it leads to, because what do we do about flower? Because as I said, it's going to be very, very hard ever to do a clinical trial on flower, and we can't be waiting 10 years to help people, not the way I see it. Now, sorry, I just moved on from that slide. Therapeutic areas that could benefit. Well, it's prolific, it's huge. I'm working with one company because they're getting very good results in menopausal women, because the women can't sleep, they've got anxiety, they've got all sorts of things like this, and they take a high CBD oil with maybe some CBN, CBG, and it's changing their life. So there's many, many applications, as well as anxiety and all this kind of thing. And then if we look at different formats, there's a range of choices that we could use. I think at the moment, one of the problems with cannabis is that it's restricted to what we call primary care in Australia, which is general practitioners. I think if we can start engaging with some specialists, say psychiatrists, rheumatologists, women's health, and people who specialise in this area, and then get the word around. So my rheumatologist said, I'm very interested in cannabis, I believe in it, but I know nothing about it, but I'd like somewhere to refer my patients to. So that's promising. So we've talked about distribution channels. So the distribution channels are through clinics or through pharmacies. What pharmacies are doing now, it's illegal to keep narcotics on site. However, if you've got high volume and you say you have 100 patients and they've got 6 repeats, you can fundamentally keep 100 times 6 repeats on, in stock. So once they dispense to somebody, they just get some more back in. So there's the volume sales direct to pharmacies. In Queensland, in Australia, doctors can actually dispense themselves. The problem in Australia is that every state's run like a different country, and every state has a different law, and none of the health departments and units communicate with each other. So we have national bodies and we have state bodies, and they'll all tell you something different. So it's very, very complicated. So marketing, well, you're not allowed to. It's that simple. You're not allowed to use the word medicinal cannabis. You can't use anything. Now they're telling us you can't even use the word plant medicine. But like everything, there's a way around it, okay? So one of the ways around using the plant medicine term is if you offer other plant medicine type products or alternatives. So we actually have a naturopath who works with us, and we do sell other products. So then it's not seen as promotional. However, if you ask the TGA a question, they will never give you a clear answer. The answer always is, you have a go and we'll let you know. And if we don't like it, we'll fine you. Like, it's very, very unfair. So building a brand, it's hard. It's really, really hard. What do you do when you can't promote? All you can do is find out who all the big clinic groups are and do deals with them. So you have to make sure that you build enough margin into your product so that you can still make a profit and still do these deals with everybody. So investment landscape for medicinal cannabis in Australia. I'm going to be really honest, if it was me, I wouldn't be investing with anyone. I'd want to look at their books, I'd want to go through their whole company. I'm an expert in running lean. I'm very proud that my company makes a lot of money. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working. So public perception, it's crazy in Australia. People are just still not embracing cannabis at all. So in summary, patient access is difficult. There's many challenges. So where do we go from here? We just keep pushing. Myself and my boss are actually engaging with Parliament and legal firms to bring the industry back to where it should be, so that it's about helping people. So that's all from me for today. I'm happy to speak to you later about any questions, and if anybody's interested in entering the market in Australia, please always contact me. I'd be happy to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa Varley of My Dispensary.